All right, guys, welcome back to another Meet Victoria Election Edition special. Very excited about this. I also want to introduce Lone Star News Network. That is our new news network. It's going to be a little bit different. We're not going to be wishing, your grandma happy 102nd birthday, even though that's a great thing. But this will be more for unbiased news that really affects our area, that really needs to get out. It's not going to be an everyday thing. It's not going to be any of this. But if we need to overcome narratives, if there's stories of our local law enforcement or local officials that needs to be told, Lone Star News Network will be helping us tell those stories. So make sure if you haven't liked the page already, you do so. Want to remind everybody, coming up, that's why we're sitting here, we have voting July 3rd. Early voting is June 16th through the 29th, and this is for the mayoral race and City Council District 3. And on that note, I want to introduce Mr. Chad Austin Hall as our District 3 City Council candidate running, one of five actually running. And so, welcome to the show, my brother.
Thank you.
Appreciate having you. Yes, sir. Thank you for coming on. What in the world, well, first off, for those who don't know anything about you, if you wouldn't mind, please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you and what in the world made you decide you wanted to run for City Council.
You bet. Thanks for having me here. It's a pleasure to spend time with you and your viewers today. A little bit about myself. I'm originally from Kentucky. Michelle, my wife, and I, we moved here in 2000. And just a little bit of a background, I actually grew up in Eastern Kentucky, a place that's wonderful, some of the best folks that you're ever going to meet. I grew up in a small little wooden room my father built for me on the back of a trailer. And he is the hardest working person I've ever met. This is where I learned grit and hard work, and also the importance and power of education. I knew that I wanted to become the first person in my family to actually graduate from college, but we had to find a way to make that happen. For me, it was through music. I worked really hard on my grades and with music, and worked my way up to become the first chair in the All-State Symphonic Band, which opened up an opportunity for me to go anywhere that I wanted to on big-time scholarships. So early in my life, I knew that I wanted to be a teacher, but I also wanted to work in business. I didn't know which one was going to come first. Since we opened up all these scholarships, that was easy. Looks like I'm going to be a teacher first. I taught for 1 year in Kentucky and had a very good year, and I got recruited, of all things, to come to Texas to be a teacher in my second year. So I had a 5-year plan. Teach for 5 years, go into business. And the principal at the time in El Campo, turned out to be a very good friend, kept calling and calling and calling, and we thought, we're not going to go to Texas. We're not going to go to, well, maybe we'll go to Texas. Let's just go down there and tell people that we went to the free state of Texas, right? We came down here and fell in love with it right away, and we moved. So I taught for 4 more years in El Campo. We moved to El Campo, but when we came here, Michelle, my wife, had come across an ad for the Victoria Symphony as an operations manager, and decided, well, this is great. She was a communications manager. We were both involved with music. She's going to try it out. So she came here and she interviewed for that job, came back to El Campo. I asked her, how did it go? She said, I think pretty good. The phone starts ringing. They want her to come back the next day and actually interview for the executive director position. And that's really how we got our deep ties into Victoria and how we fell in love with it. So I didn't want Michelle doing the drive from El Campo to Victoria every day for the next 4 years. So we moved here and bought our first home in 2001, and we're still actually in that home in District 3. And in keeping with the 5-year plan, I started my MBA, and I had to decide between 3 different schools. I had it boiled down to Rice, the University of Texas at Austin, and UHV, which really wasn't on my radar. And some of the people here in the community recommended that we go over there and check it out and meet with the dean. So I did, and the sell that he had for me then was UHV is growing, Victoria is growing, and we need to try to keep people here as best as what we can. What we're doing now is we're going through our AACSB accreditation, and if you come here, this will be the same big time accreditation that these other major universities have, but you'll always know that you were part of the student body that helped us be successful to implement it for everybody moving forward. I like that a lot. So that helped tie us into the community even more, and we're very proud of UHV. So I was lucky at the end of my 5-year plan. I finished my last day of teaching in May, had my first job offer that we're going to accept in July, graduated in August, boom, boom, boom. I started to work for a healthcare company, developing marketing plans to present to them in places that might be possibilities for opening up new nursing homes. And from there, they decided when they started to build new nursing homes that they had to get them staffed. So I started in human resources, staffing with nursing. I became the director of human resources, and then I had the opportunity to move to the city of Victoria to become the senior human resource analyst. So I worked at the city for a couple of years before I moved to regional Steel to become the director of human resources. And from there, I was promoted up to operations manager, assistant general manager, and ultimately general manager, and that's where I've been for the past 14 years.
Nice. And one of the things I saw about you that you did mention is you're also an athlete. And tell me a little bit about I like to call myself, even though I'm behind the training curve right now, but tell me a little bit about your athletic career as well, if you don't mind.
A lot of things that have happened to me along the way aren't necessarily by plan, they're by necessity. I was in really bad shape. I was 70 pounds heavier than what I am right now, and I had all sorts of really bad health problems. Surgeries here, prescriptions there, and it always seemed to me that it was up to somebody else to fix me. If I can just go to one more doctor, if I can just get one more prescription. And finally I met a doctor here in town, Dr. Chang, who had told me that, listen, you have to get control of yourself. You're the problem. The reason why everything is so bad is because you're the problem. And we went through my diet, and we went through the different non-routines that I had, all the fast food I was eating, I wasn't working out, and he gave me an ultimatum that we can go through all these terrible surgeries, or I could start swim, bike, running, eat healthy, and get control of it myself. I was just under 30, I was on all sorts of meds, cholesterol lowering. If there was a medication out there, some doctor had prescribed it, and I thought that was normal. And for whatever reason, when I went back outside of his office, there was a vision that popped in my head when I was a kid, and I'm going to date myself, back when we only had 3 channels to watch, right?
Yes, sir.
ABC had the show, The Wide World of Sports. And I remember watching as a kid this vision of this thing called the Iron Man? What is that? That's that real crazy race in Hawaii, 140 miles. So it's a 2.4 mile swim, 112 mile bike, and then a full marathon, a 26.2 for 140.6 mile. Why am I even thinking about that? That's crazy. I can't even like run around the track. I'm so bad out of shape. I don't know how to swim. And everything was in so much chaos for me that I decided at that point in time that, you know what, if I'm going to fail, I'm okay with that. I'm going to try. So from there, I started working out and learning how to swim, watching videos on the internet, going to the Healthplex, nearly drowning myself. And it was the first really big test for myself to know that a lot of things that we wait for somebody else to fix for us, we have so much power ourselves to do it ourselves if we just have enough courage to look in the face of fear and not be afraid of the things that I can't do that, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough. We're capable of great things, but we have to believe, and sometimes you just have to jump and go do it. And I fixed all my medical problems. I had no more surgeries. I got all of my medications, and Dr. Chang and I are very good friends to this day, and I credit him with not putting me on the table for another surgery and letting me know that I had the power to fix it myself if I wanted to. And it was one of the best things that ever happened to me.
Well, we'll have to have you come back and talk about all that at one point, because I kind of had a similar, I got really out of shape at one point in my life, similar type deal where I was on, acid reflux medicine, all this kind of stuff. Changed the diet, started working out, had a lifestyle change, changed everything, and surprise, surprise, things started working better and all that. But it was that self accountability, and that everything you just said right now is so spot on, and I would love to sit down, because to me that's a whole nother non-political subject that I would love to get into, because I think that can empower people. I think that can help people, and so many people are looking for that shortcut, that quick pill, that quick fix. That, well, it's not, and it oftentimes does require that accountability and lifestyle change. But when you come out that other end, wow, like you're capable. I've done a couple triathlon sprints, not even full ones, and stuff like that. So my little brother has done an Ironman, and so I understand what kind of, even though I've never done it, what kind of commitment that takes, and discipline and accountability, and to me that's you can get those type of things in your life. The athletic principles apply to everything. You can carry that over to your job, you can carry it over to politics, you can get that accountability and drive. And so great stuff. We're going to talk down the road, because I think health is something that, everybody was bombing around in masks and this and that, but we don't talk about, obesity. We don't. Anyway, I'm going to go down a whole side thing, because I think you're spot on with that, and I'd love to talk more about that. What do you see, though, looping back around to this, what do you see as the role of a city council member? What the public a lot of times doesn't understand per se what a city council member does, all of that kind of stuff. So what do you see as that role, and what is the role of a city council member to you?
You bet. And this is a really good point, because oftentimes it's the old saying, right, that facts are negotiable, but perceptions are not. One of the things that we're going to try to do with our campaign is actually reach out and try to do small videos to reach out and talk to people about the way things actually are. Oftentimes you'll hear politicians come out, I'm going to cut taxes and fix all the roads. And I think that sometimes once they actually get in to see how things work, it's a lot different than what you'd expect that it would be. And when I actually worked at the experience, when I worked for the City of Victoria in Human Resources, I got firsthand experience in learning this myself. A lot of the things that I thought would be a certain way, well, I'll change this, I'll change that, I actually learned were completely different in a government setting. And we also had the benefit of going back and attending all 3 civilian academies. When I had the opportunity to advance my career and become the Director of Human Resources at Regional Steel, when we made that change, I went back to learn more about the city that I never had a chance to do. And I would encourage everybody to go back and do the Civilian Academy, the Civilian Police Academy, the Civilian Fire Academy. It's wonderful. And it gives you a chance to really do a deep dive and learn how our city actually works. And in the Civilian Academy, they talk a lot about the different roles, about how our government's set up, city manager style. Really, city council functions more as a board of directors. And that may be surprising to people. They don't actually go in and set a lot. They don't do a lot of the work. The board of directors will function in a way that depends on the city manager, who depends on all the different departments, who in turn depend on all the different employees. And my experience in working at the city, those people are wonderful people, and they love their jobs. They do great. So council assists as an oversight role, but there may be many things out there that people think that it's this way, but it could be something entirely different.
Yeah, no, well, and we don't have to go down to, but the median down to Mayoral, for example, that's not our city council, but everybody's mad at them and stuff, and it has nothing to do with them, and so there are a lot of misconceptions. I agree. What are your top priorities as a candidate for city council for this? What do you see as you're the things that, hey, I'm passionate about these. These are the ones that I want to get in there and deal with for myself.
Mm-hmm. Well, in complete transparency, the first thing, learn as much as I can. I think for all of us, there's going to be a learning curve. And it's any time that you start a new job, and this will be like starting a new job, there are going to be so many things that we don't know. And for us too, there's things that we may think that are a certain way, but they may not be. I think that where I have an advantage though going in is that I am the only candidate that spent the time outside of work to attend all 3 civilian academies to learn everything that I could. At the time, I did not have political aspirations. I just wanted to do it so I could learn more about how it works. What was fascinating to me is I thought it was this way, but actually it's this way. Well, is it the same way over here? It is. How about over here? So even though there's going to be a big learning curve for all of us, it's for me, I think I'm more prepared going in because I have attended all these academies and worked in human resources with all the departments. So learning would be the number 1 priority. And from there, in all honesty, is taking a look at things that I bring a particular skill set into. I know that we'll talk about budgeting here, for example. I have years worth of looking at multi-million-dollar budgets, overseeing that. So I come in with that skill set, hiring people here in Victoria, creating jobs, and some of the things that are concerns to our community, I feel like I'm well poised to try to deal with.
Gotcha. So I've noticed that, my humble opinion, Victoria's about 65%-ish conservative leaning, right leaning, in our voting, etc. But when I sit back and look at the school board or city council, the chamber, you name it, I feel like these organizations lean left. And in a right-leaning community, we have left-leaning leadership. And I think that, to me, causes a little bit of the friction sometimes between leadership in the community, where we sometimes feel like we're being governed against instead of represented by, because I've noticed it in local races, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me. We don't talk about party lines. We don't run under the R or the D or any of that kind of stuff. And hey, you're my neighbor, whatever, which I get. I understand why that was kind of set up that way. But in the same breath, I think that also leads to some of the issues that we have as I vote for my buddy because he's my buddy and I like him. Well, he gets up there and we have totally different ideologies on things. And where I classify myself as a fiscal conservative and one of the old school fiscal ones that, roads, bridges, security, and if it's not that, we don't need to be spending it. That's where I place myself. But a lot of other people aren't as fiscal as I am and all of this. And so that being said, where do you align yourself? And how you answer this is up to you. You don't need to say Republican D. You can if you want to, but where would you line yourself up on an ideology spectrum? Are you a lean and mean government type of person? Are you let's grow the government to accommodate the people? Where does your ideology lean as far as government size, etc.? The presence of government, I guess, would be a good way to ask that.
Sure, you bet. I think that I'm a very strong proponent of local control. I am very pro-local, and the further it gets away from local control, the less supportive I am. But there are some things that we do need a good federal government for. Interstates. There's been some good things coming out of there. The Civil Rights Act of 1964. I think that more of the problem for me is not so much government intrusion, which I'm opposed to, as much as the people that we actually send to government. It's hard to run for office. It's much harder than what I thought it would be. I'm not the guy that's going to come along and I've always wanted a political career, I'm going to jump into politics. When it came time for me to run, I had to do a lot of soul searching and deliberated a lot. I think that oftentimes it's probably more the case that we don't send our best people to government, and that's more of what the issue is than government itself. But coming back, I'm a local control guy.
It works for me. Let me ask you, so I'm going to kind of rapid fire you here to try to get some of these questions in. I noticed recently one of the things that's going on is Governor Abbott just passed, the mask mandate's been lifted. We don't have to do that anymore. Mm-hmm. So two things. One is, do you agree, was it time, get rid of these things, what have you, or do you think we should still be wearing them, keep them longer? And then that's going to lead to my next one of the vaccine passport thing, or having to show your vaccine potentially to go into businesses, etc. My first glance is I don't like having to carry my papers. I don't like having to, while I understand while businesses, feel a need to protect their employees, mm-hmm. Protect the clients, etc. I just don't like a business asking to see medical, stuff and all this. But I also understand that's their business, and so I struggle with that concept of it. I get so mad with people if a business says, "Hey, wear your mask," and then somebody walks into there and this is America. I don't have to wear my mask. Well, you walked into their business. Right. Let's They ask you to. I won't go to some place that asks me to wear a mask because I choose not to, and I respect that business. Mm-hmm. I hate it when it's the other way around and they walk into somebody's businesses and yell at them, and so I don't like the government telling a business what to do per se. But all that said, what do you think about the mask mandates? Good timing, keep them on, and then the next question, what are your thoughts on having to show your COVID vaccine to operate or to go into businesses here, etc.?
I'm happy that they lifted the mask mandate. But if somebody wants to wear a mask, I think that individual liberty, all liberty is individual. If they want to wear one, that's just fine. I do not like I am totally opposed to any kind of vaccine passport. Simply put.
No, that's as simple as we needed it to go. One of the things right now that we're seeing is the borders just being overrun. They're just illegal immigration all-time high, and we're starting to see bailouts, of illegal aliens, if not weekly, daily almost. And then talking to local law enforcement, it's having an effect, a ripple effect. It's burning through their personnel, hours, finances, expenses, all of these type of things. And yet, it seems to be with the local media, it's more important about what they're called versus what's actually happening. What are your thoughts on the border issue right now and the crisis we're facing at the border and all of these, illegal alien bailouts and all these things that are happening over and over and over again? What are your thoughts about that, and what do we do to stop that problem or to support our law enforcement, et cetera?
Well, I'd encourage everybody, again, if they're just now seeing this video for the first time, to go back and watch the video you did with Ben Zeller. It was very good, where he talked about some of these issues also. And this kind of ties back to our constituents in District 3 and one of the reasons why we decided to run, and which also ties back to my experience of working with the city and with the police department and going through the Civilian Police Academy. I am deeply concerned about all that, but also on a local level, I'm concerned about us making sure that we take care of our first responders. The retention rates for our good folks really alarms me because there's so many bigger sign-on bonuses, just up 59. And coming back to the theme of how sometimes Victoria can be seen as a pass-through market, we'll have people come in, get their experience, and go somewhere else. And it breaks my heart to think that our first responders, like the police, for example, have to decide, well, do I stay here when I can make more money just a couple miles up the road? Or do I stay here and try to figure out my insurance? Or what am I going to do about my pay and send my kids to school and so forth? So it's deeper than just what's happening at the border, which is in complete chaos. I don't think that there's many Texans that are going to disagree with that. But even up and down 77, we're hearing a lot more sirens, a lot more police chases than what we ever have before. And you see the stories in the Advocate of what the county's going through. It's difficult, but here's what's key for me in supporting our local police and making sure that we're holding on to our best people. We don't want our seasoned veterans to leave us here in Victoria to go to Richmond and Rosenberg to take bigger sign-on bonuses or better pay, or anywhere for that matter. The retention rate is really important. I want to keep our seasoned veterans here. It's nice that we have folks coming in, but our police force, and Michelle and I's experience in being here and being tied in with the police, we can tell that a lot of people over the past 20 years have gone other places that we just wish could have stayed, or we could have figured out some way to keep them here. So coming back to a key theme for us, retention, first responders, it's all tied together, especially in District 3, because how long is it going to be before this stuff comes out of the county and it's going up and down Navarro and becomes a concern for us here? It's here.
Yeah, no, I agree. That kind of leads me into the budget that we alluded to earlier. In the city budget, are there areas that is there pork? Is there fraud, waste, abuse? Are there areas that, like I said, I'm an old school fiscal conservative. Roads, bridges, security. I don't think the government should be in the fund business. I don't think, losing $500,000 on Boot Fest every year is a good thing. If they were making $500,000 on Boot Fest every year, we could talk. But I don't think that that's the role of government. While it feels good, to go take that money at threat of force for people to go throw a concert. I just don't think that that's wise. So do you see areas in the budget? And again, I want to preface, I understand you are not in office yet. You're not sitting there with full access. But from an outsider's point of view, do you think that there's areas that can bring savings to the taxpayers, that areas of the budget that could be cut? Or do we already have a lean, mean, efficient budget that, no, it's good to go?
The first thing I say that, in all honesty, is I am a candidate from the outside, taking a very far away look coming in. But, sometimes the budget too, I think there's a lot of misperception out there also that, well, why don't we just take this money from here and put it over here? Why can't we take it from here and fix the roads over here? And again, that's not the way that, unfortunately, it works. There's a lot of restrictions on how funds are spent, how they can be allocated, where they're put to, and sometimes it's not as easy. I'm going to cut taxes and fix all the roads. That's not the way that it works, because even the process of digging up a road to replace it, there's a bucket of money that can come from, but then there's utilities, and then you have to have a different bucket for that, and then there's all these different, it's so complicated. And so, yes, I would definitely take a look, because I have experience in doing that where I work at, and there are some things I'd be interested in taking a look at. Boot Fest is a really good point that you bring up.
Gotcha. So that kind of leads me into another one here. Downtown revitalization, and let me preface very strongly, because there's some miscues on people wondering where I line up on all this stuff. I want a prosperous downtown. I want every business owner downtown to every day be better than the last day. I think a vibrant downtown would, of course, help the city. I really do. My issue with it is taxpayer dollars going to downtown property owners through the Main Street program, etc. I have no issue whatsoever if it's, if the local or if the residents of downtown got together and they did all this. I'd run videos on them. I'd support them. I'd go do it, whatever, because I like that and I think it needs to be good. But what I have an issue with is what I feel like is the city putting its thumb on the scale. And to me, the Main Street program, from an outsider's perspective, kind of sums up a lot of what people don't like about government, because it feels like the good old boy program. It feels like you have a lot of the most affluent people in our community, a lot of the wealthiest people in our community that are the downtown property owners. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And somehow, and they make up a lot of the boards and the councils and the this and that. And somehow now the city has scooped this up, and now they're getting tax dollars, and the city's running advertisements for them and doing all this kind of stuff. Well, what are they doing for everybody else? What are they doing for all the businesses on the north side, on the south side? What I think what's good for one is good for all. And if they want to run promotions and okay, well then do it for everybody, or don't do it for anybody at all. And I think what people have an issue with, and it feels kind of gross to the people on the outside, is we see downtown people getting all of these resources and city help and city aid, and nobody else is. And it's hard to understand, like, well, why do those property owners get tax dollars to help their businesses when nobody else does? Well, because they're making an investment. They're taking a risk opening a business. Well, so does every entrepreneur in this town. That doesn't do it for me. Well, because they're opening a business downtown, so they're taking an extra risk. Well, what's the risk? Well, downtown. So, I mean, awesomeness just hasn't caught up with downtown yet. So we need to give tax dollars to help these people. Well, if you're having to revitalize it, it didn't make it to begin with. And when you have the city organically growing one direction and doing all this stuff, again, I don't argue with the premises of a private downtown helped. I argue with that doesn't justify this set of property owners getting tax dollars to me over the rest of the city, or from the rest of the city to help this. And I know it's through the sales, I know the 17 different ways that they get a half cent here and all, but bottom line is it's still, they're not producing a dollar. It's still coming from taxpayers. My issue, again, with downtown revitalization is simply that. Why do those people get tax help, and why is that always all these different incentives floated for downtown people that the rest of the community doesn't get? I feel like Victoria blew it a long time ago when our route to Houston, instead of doing like Sugarland did and putting up outlet malls and things where we have an unlimited traffic count every day, thousands of cars pass through. Instead, we put up industrial stuff, machine shops, all this kind of stuff, and we expect people to drive through and say, hey, check out that machine shop. Boy, that really makes me want to exit here in Victoria and go to downtown Victoria. And if we were going to revitalize anything, I don't know why we didn't do that. But moving on. So that was a super, super long build up to ask you, what are your thoughts on downtown revitalization, for or against? And if for, how do you plan to pay for it?
Sure. The downtown thing, I don't think that anybody disagrees that we want a vibrant downtown, but it does get a little bit complicated because I like private efforts. I like private entrepreneurship, private efforts, and there's some wonderful folks down there. We, at Liberty Coffee House, we go down there and visit Rachel and Crystal every chance we get, Vela Farms, Huvars. There's so many good folks down there, but I agree with you. I think we're right because our efforts, while we want to do there, we're missing our main corridor. And if you're coming from Houston down to Corpus, you never see us. And really, yeah, you're right. We don't have much of a reason to stop. When you're driving by, you don't see anything. And this kind of comes back to the Boot Fest question that you had earlier too, if I come back and touch on that just a little bit. I know that we want to put some efforts in there. I like the private efforts, private entrepreneurship, and since we're talking about Boot Fest specifically, that's another effort to help with the revitalization of downtown. The thing for me for Boot Fest, not a fan. I do not think that the city should be in the business of trying to spend taxpayer dollars to entertain. We have so many wonderful organizations here in town that are already doing that for us. We have the Victoria Symphony, Victoria Ballet, Victoria Theater. Michael Tier's doing a great job over there, Victoria Fine Arts Association. And beyond that, we also have a lot of private promoters that can come into town too and do this for us. So this is something that I would like to learn more about in the way that it works in the budgeting process, again, from like 25,000 feet looking in. And as far as the downtown thing goes, that's, yes, we want to vibrate downtown, but what's the formula to get that figured out? When you go to Houston, where do you go? Do you go to downtown or do you go everywhere else except for downtown? And every city has that problem. It's not unique to us. So this is a learning opportunity for me.
Fair enough. We're going to go a little bit long, but I just got some questions that I feel like we have to get out. We kind of alluded to it. I think taxation is theft. I'll just throw it out there. I don't like it. I really hate property taxes because I don't like the fact that you never truly own your home. You can walk in, you can pay your home cash right now, but if I don't pay my taxes, under threat of force, somebody shows up and takes my home from me. I don't like that because you're renting it from the government for the rest of your life. Then on top of that, you have property owners that I feel bear the financial cost of running the city, and you put it all on one set of individuals. And I hear, well, renters pay property taxes too. I would argue, no, they don't. That's lost profit to a landlord to me. That's a landlord who has chosen to invest his money into getting an extra property to put a tenant in, that now you have raised those rates on him, so he has to raise the rate. and you're cutting into his profit. I wouldn't argue that that's the tenant paying. That to me feels like a backdoor way that they say everybody's paying when I don't think it is. That tenant, that's just lost profit for that landlord that had to come up with the money to buy that. The thing I can hold my nose for is a consumption tax, because I feel like that's something that, first and foremost, nobody's going to lose their home, which is huge to me. This is America, and I don't think you should lose your home over somebody deciding to pass a tax that you don't agree with, whatever. So they're not going to lose their home. I think it's huge. Secondly, everybody pays. If the drug dealer down the street decides to go and buy something, well, he pays that tax as well. But I also like the fact that if I choose to stay home today and spend nothing, then my money stays right in my pocket and doesn't go anywhere else. One of the things I like about an incentive tax is also I feel like it, I hear, well, if things are bad, then the government will have to do with less. I'm okay with that, because I think if we have to pull in our belts because times are hard, I don't see how the government gets to not have to do that, and we all do. I think that's part of the problem why we have so much debt, because they don't live within their means. So another super long setup is, what are your thoughts on a consumption tax versus property taxes?
You bet. The city's actually funded in part in thirds. So a third sales tax, a third property tax, and a third other. And I actually bought a chart just to show your viewers if that's okay. Because oftentimes there's a lot of misconception out there. This actually shows our increasing property taxes over time. And the red line here, this actually is the sales tax that you're talking about. And we're going in reverse of each other. And this is a great chart. It's on the city website. I encourage everybody to take a look at it. The issue that we have here, coming back to our plan to try to help out with the community, is actually, how do we keep people here? How do we keep people growing here, growing their families, raising their families, contributing to the community long term instead of coming and going kind of thing? I think the sales tax has a lot to do with that also. How do we get people to spend their money right here in Victoria where we live at? And you can clearly see that we're on the decline as far as that goes. But as far as the government doing less when we have less, you can also see property tax over time. That's just not what's happening.
Right. And that, I think, is part of the frustration that people constantly feel, is the government continues to grow. They don't have to make the cuts that we all have to make inside of our own personal budgets and inside of our own homes. And that's why things like during the bond, for example, when I would hear people say, just give up your cup of Starbucks this month and you can, well, you don't know what people's tax burdens are. And this whole deal, like it's scary to me, because as our property values continue to just skyrocket and go through the roof, buyers' buying power is dramatically reduced. Sellers' profit that they take from selling these things is dramatically reduced. And the culprit seems to always come back to taxes to me. And the greatest thing that I feel like we could have an immediate impact in this community would be to lower taxes on property owners, lower taxes in general. But that seems like the one thing that's never thrown out there. It's, well, we'll hire somebody to come in and tell us how to get more affordable housing. We'll spend money to do. Well, how about you just stop and realize that maybe you guys caused us this by constantly raising taxes. I've always felt like, since I moved to Victoria, that they had this weird concept that they could tax their way into prosperity. If we just keep raising taxes, then we're all going to be, rich and all this. And I've never understood that. And so, but what concerns me again is our properties values on the residential side are just through the roof. And I think that the hammer's going to drop eventually, because it just can't keep going higher and higher, because our pay in the community isn't matching the inflation that we're seeing across the board. And then to take it a step further, kind of the answer that I'm hearing from some of our elected officials and stuff like that is, well, the way to fix this is to go after the CAD, not to work on the residential side, but to raise commercial values. And then my first thought with that, well, who does that help besides the politicians and the taxing entities to get even more money? Because I would argue the people that on the residential side just got hammered by raised property assessed values. And then now you're going to go raise all the commercial values across the board too. Well, who owns all the commercial side? I'd argue that it's a vast majority of the same people on the residential side. So that you're going to double whammy them. And as we see, sales tax, businesses are on the decline, but everybody's about to get hit with taxes skyrocketing. And that, to me, that chart illustrates the whole miscue of the free market and government to me. Because the only people, you look at that chart, the only people that seem to come out whole and better is government, whereas the people paying for it, we're on that declining list. We're on the one going up, and somehow the government's on the up and all this. And to me, that needs to be reversed. And that's why I like the consumption taxes. To me, it starts easing some of that burden, you know. And so, am I getting it wrong anywhere in there? Do you?
No, and one of the things that's kind of unique about Victoria too. You remember I told you Michelle and I we still live in the same first home we bought 20 years
Yes,
ago,
sir.
right? So we have 20 years worth of experience in the same house, looking at this exact same thing. And what's odd is that commercial doesn't seem to keep up with residential. There's often times where commercial actually is down, but residential somehow here keeps going up and up and up.
Yeah, and I agree. And I just wonder, is the solution to raise the commercial side too, or should we look at ways to reduce the other side of the equation and stuff? And so, no, I think that's good. Last thing, we kind of danced all around it. Why does the public not feel all the money that's being spent on the Victoria streets? Why, since I've lived here, that to me has been, if I had to pick a priority, I would say it's the streets. Because, I always hear everybody, well, we need to build a new school because that's what people look at when they move to a new community. Well, I would argue they look more so at the test scores and the ratings of that school than they do of the building, but side subject, but on these roads, that's something from the first day I moved here, I was like, wow, these roads suck. And 12 years later, 13 years later, they feel like they're worse than when I first moved here. And I know we have little bits of areas, and this isn't a knock, or I'm not throwing rocks at, because I don't know how to fix that either. And so when I'm sitting here, knocking the streets, I'm not attacking anybody personally because I don't know the answer. But what is the answer? Like, how are we so far behind our streets? How do our streets suck so bad? And what do we need to do to start feeling progress in that and actually feel like, yeah, we're turning a corner in that. I feel like every day we fall further behind on the streets instead of getting caught up. Is there an answer to that? What do we do? Or is that even something, let's just hypothetically in a perfect world say we stopped everything else in Victoria and we just only focused on the roads. Would that even change it or not? And again, I know you're not in yet, so this is probably one of those deals that you can't fully answer because you're not in yet, but 30,000 feet, what are your thoughts?
30,000 feet. This is the exact same thing that we talked about when we first moved here in 2000. So it's been going on at least for 21 years for us. I'm sure it's been going on longer for that. The folks have lived here longer than what we have. There's so many moving components. And I think that, first off, there's so many great things happening with the city. There's many great things, and Ashley Streville does a good job trying to get the information out there. And one of the reasons why I wanted to run is I also want to do my part to try to help get information out there and communicate, use what influence we have. Oftentimes, business leaders are reluctant to jump in because there's so much risk in going into public life. But I think that we deserve to have people stand up and try to use the influence that they have to try to get information out there. The roads is a perfect situation. Nobody can go in to an election promising that they're going to raise or lower taxes and fix all the roads. Caleb, I'm going to tell you right up front, that's not the way that's going to work. If that were the case, it would be done by now. People would have actually fixed it. And I think that it gets a little bit more difficult than what they think when they're going in. But one of the things I want to talk to you about, when we had a meeting with the city attorney and a couple of other of the executive team last week, as a matter of fact, all the candidates, and Thomas Gush had made a point of talking about this exact same thing. I am not a fan of trying to raise taxes because once we get done with that, it can stick around forever. One of the things he had suggested, though, that was kind of unique to me that I'd like to explore a little bit more was the possibility of floating bonds for roads. Now, the reason why that's not a big thing for them right now is because Victoria likes to shoot down bonds, and it's really hard to get it out there. But coming back to the communication thing, I think that sometimes, even with some of the school bond, it's not really what you say, it's how you say it. And we need better people out there that can communicate what those options are. So if we're going to build new roads, here's what it's going to take. But a lot of times with the information in the city, even this chart right here, I would bet that many people have no idea because they've never seen this. It's not their fault. And like I said, Ashley's doing a great job trying to get out there, but how do we communicate everything that's going on in our city government to folks out there when they're more interested in other things? We've got t-ball practice, piano lessons, we've got Astros on TV, and it's nobody's fault. It's just that we've moved on to things that are more important in our daily lives. Funny enough, though, people can tell you a lot more about what's going on in the national scene than what they actually can in the local scene. And that was an issue for me, too. One of the reasons why I decided to jump in and try to help out, because The road issue, there are options, but I think that we're gun shy in approaching some things like bond issues for specific projects, for example, because Victoria doesn't have a very good history of pushing bonds through. But again, I don't think necessarily that's because of the message. It may be the messaging. And my experience as a business leader, I know that sometimes you're going to have to invest in your company in order for it to grow. But there's definitely a right way to do that and a wrong way to do that. More importantly, though, there's a right way to say it and a wrong way to say it.
Well, and I think you're spot on with that, because one of the things that you talked about earlier, which I think was spot on, is people think, well, we'll just go, we'll move this, we'll move that. Well, government has become so complicated, and I would argue that's part of the problem, is because it kept growing, and we're going to tax here, we're going to tax there, we're going to now pull taxes from here, but we'll do it under these rules, and then well, now you've created this big giant monstrosity that the public, we no longer understand how anything works. Even if people are transparent, we can't follow it from A to B to Z, back over to J, then down to Q, who now cuts it over to, and I think that's part of the problem with an ever-growing government, is you have to go to 4 universities, then run for 15 different board spots, then do all this stuff to understand this much.
Yeah.
Well, that's part of the problem to me, is I think that if we went through and we just simplified and we got back to the basics of doing roads, bridges, security, and a lot of that would go away, because then we wouldn't be funding 6 million other side little projects and all of that. But I do agree with you, because I try to even understand this stuff, and it just feels like it's so much of it is way over my head. And I have seen, I do think Ashley does a good job over there, and I have seen where I feel the city is doing a good job to try to communicate more, but I also feel like they have a tough sell in a lot of areas, because a lot of that stuff just sucks, and I don't. Again, how do you make some of those things exciting, or how do you, because they're not. And to me, again, I would argue that it's way too, again, that's part of the problem, I think, is there's 72 layers to everything, instead of just being like, nah, they get your money into this and that's it. If it's not for this, that's it. But that beast keeps on growing and stuff. And so that, I think that you've hit the nail there, because and that's why also, we get so frustrated, because I have zero desire to run for council. But I also want people there that represent my beliefs. And so when I see council doing all these things that don't seem to match the community, and then everybody's like, well, then you need to go sit in on all the city council meetings, and you need to, well, I don't want to go sit in on all the city council meetings. I've got a young son now. I want to go be a new dad. And so I hate that we have a system that is so complicated that that's the only way that we can do anything, is to have somebody there full time to always be watching everything and all that. So I guess I said all that to say this. Would you do, are you open to trying to lean down government? Are you open to, or simplify, I guess, would be, I don't even know what exactly I'm trying to say. It's just, I feel everything is way too complicated. I feel everything it's just this giant beach, and I feel like part of that, as long as they keep it so big and so confusing, then we can't really follow, I feel that works against them instead of form, because I feel like the government works against us, and I don't trust them in a lot. And it's not that I don't trust the individuals. Because I think that just about everybody up there does so with a pure heart. They do so to give back to this community. We may have different beliefs, and I'll launch my criticisms at them when I think that they're whatever, but I don't think they're bad people, and I don't think that they're out to screw us or to steal from us or anything like that. But a lot of it is just we don't understand, and that confusion allows government to keep growing and growing and growing. Well, we just need to scoop this up now, and now the city's in the loan business, and we're giving a loan. What? Why are we giving loans? Is this I don't think we should shut down businesses. B, I don't think we should be giving loans. But it's all government is growing, and it all goes back to this chart right here, that when we're going down, government is growing up. And so I guess with that, what would you say to somebody like me? I'll end it at that. That just, I just don't like government much anymore, because it feels like it's just grown into something that's always present in my life, when I wish it would be a background. I feel like we shouldn't have to think about government much. It feels like a constant intrusion into my life at every single turn, because there's always a taxing entity with its hand out, wanting my business is taxed, my home is taxed, the items in my office are taxed, my profit is taxed, my gas is taxed, everything is taxed. What do you say to somebody like me?
I understand. And frankly, I know right where you're coming from. And that's one of the reasons why we decided to jump in and try to help out and run. A lot of the things that are going on for the city are great things, but the communication could be part of the issue because we don't have people, our leaders in the community, getting involved to help get the message out of all the great things we are doing. But also, if we want to do other great things, we have to get more people on board. Come on, we have to have a team Victoria of people there. And Caleb, I could sit on the side and somebody should do that. Somebody should rally the troops. Somebody should be talking about all this stuff. Somebody should help Ashley out, or somebody should help out. I wanted to help out. And this kind of may come back to me being a teacher. We're afraid of things that we don't understand all the time. And oftentimes I think it does come back to the messaging. The magic for Victoria, no matter who gets elected, is not going to happen in the council chamber. The magic happens when we get out in the community, and that's where the communication part comes in. When I was a teacher, one of the things that was so difficult is when you're trying to figure out why why can't we add 4 plus 4? What's going on with this kid here? Why can't we can't add 4 plus 4? Some of the best moments for me is when I'd actually get out of the classroom and I would go sit down at the dinner table, and you'd find out things like, well, the reason why we're having a hard time in school is because daddy left, or mommy's having to work 3 jobs. Now the kid's trying to work a job. And even with, you can say that you support the police, but for us going through the police academy and actually riding in the police cruiser overnight, doing the overnight visits and finding out what's going on in our community while we're there with the police and finding out what their needs are, is entirely different than just complaining about the problem. So I think that the Crestwood Project, I just love how the city is getting people together now and they're communicating. That's spot on. So I think that in order to try to rally Victoria, more of us are going to have to step up, and we're going to have to try to help out with the messaging, because there are great things going here. We want to keep people here. This is a great place to be. Michelle and I have lived here for 20 years. We've had the opportunity to go do many different things in many bigger cities with bigger pay, but that's not always the thing that we looked at. We looked at the roots here and how special Victoria is. And if we really mean it that we're going to stay here and try to help out, then we have to stay here and try to help out. But it's going to take all of us. It takes more people with patience, the heart of a teacher. They have influence in the community. They want to help with the messaging to get out there and talk about all the great things that are happening, because remember how we said facts are negotiable, but perceptions are not? There are a lot of great things that are happening out there, but maybe it's the messaging. We just don't know about it. So it's going to be incumbent upon people like us to step up and try to help get all those messages out.
Roger that. On that note, how do people follow your campaign? How do they, if they have a question for you, where do they find you at to learn more about you, to find out about your campaign, etc.?
Thanks. Well, we chatforvictoria.com is our website. You can find us on Facebook. And we do plan on posting a lot of videos to kind of help out, explain things like where District 3 is, how the budget works, things that we know so far, just to try to help out with our communication outreach also.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time. I sincerely appreciate it. You know, I'm glad that while it's a lot of work, I'm glad that there's so many of you guys tossing your hat in the ring, because it brings in different ideas, different perspectives. It eliminates echo chambers, things like that. And so I appreciate it. And to your wife, to your family, and to all the candidates, thank you for running and tossing your hat in the ring, because it's an intrusion into your life. It's an intrusion into your time. And win or lose, you guys sacrifice a lot to do this. And so I'm grateful to each and every one of you that do. And even though I hold people accountable and give them a hard time, I sincerely appreciate everybody that runs. And even if we have different beliefs on things, I'm grateful to them, because I don't want to be out there. And so I'm glad that others step forward and do that. Guys, one more time, don't forget to like Lone Star News Network. Voting is July 3rd. Early voting is June 16th through the 29th. Meet Victoria, Lone Star News Network, and we'll see you at the next one.